Welcome to The Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. My name is Emma and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today I'm joined by an absolutely fantastic woman who I really enjoy spending time with, and I'm so appreciative of her joining me today and sharing her personal story. I'm joined by Emma. Emma is the mum of two, and her interests they involve basically internet stalking Harry Styles and following everything that he does with what some could call obsession, or others could just call excitement. So it totally depends how you look at things. She's a midwife with a background in OT, and she's here with me today talking about Pride. So in Australia, we celebrate Pride Month in November, and today we're going to talk about Pride. So thank you very much for joining me today, Emma.
That's my pleasure.
So talk to me about why Pride is important to you.
That's a good question. Probably because I'm fairly new to the Pride community. And so finding spaces where you can surround yourself with other people and know that they have similar experiences or are looking for a similar community, looking for joy in that community.
I think we're all looking for belonging, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it feels like a safer space. It feels like somewhere you can be yourself and get to know people without constantly kind of thinking, are these people who it's okay to have these conversations with?
Yeah. I remember, so my first, well, not my first volunteering role, but, sort of my first volunteering role as an adult was with WAC, so West Australian AIDS Council, and there's a lot of training that you have to go through in order to do that. And I remember at the end of the first 2 days of basic training, they said, what's your takeaway from today? And my biggest takeaway, and so I was 17 when I did this training, and I'm not 17 anymore, so it was a long time ago, but I still remember my biggest takeaway was I just assumed everyone was heterosexual. And unless you sort of at somewhere like the court and people are, let's say, obvious, then, I just assumed that. And so I guess that was a huge wake up for me, that in this idea of, well, why do we need Pride Parade? Well, why don't we have a heterosexual parade? Well, we can walk down the street holding somebody's hand without fear of insult or injury every single day. And homosexual people or people who identify as LGBTQIA+ possibly don't have that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, hopefully Pride gives us that safe space and community. But you said that you're new to the Pride community. Do you mind if I share how old you are?
Of course you can. So
you're 50 and just coming into, I guess, exploring who you are a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose over the last couple of years, I have started to explore my sexuality, having been married in a heterosexual relationship for a really long time, and then being divorced, and looking to start dating again, where the last time I had dated, there was no such thing as the internet, never mind internet dating. So that's terrifying in itself. And then kind of exploring that whole experience. What was I actually looking for? Who actually was I as a single person and not just as a mum? And in my work roles, like, who am I?
Yeah.
So it was a massive process that I've gone through with some very long-suffering friends and a psychologist of, kind of who is Emma and what does she want and where does she want to move forward? And sexuality was part of that whole process. Yeah.
So you were married for a long time. And how long were you married for?
20 years.
So you married quite young?
Yeah, so I was married in my early 20s.
So prior to getting married, did you have any sort of inkling that you didn't fit in the heterosexual kind of box?
Well, hindsight's an amazing thing, isn't it? And I think a lot of people who perhaps go through this journey later on look back and go, oh, so not everyone feels like that about a co-worker or a movie star or whatever who's the same gender as you are. Probably at the time, no, because when I went through my teenage years, we're talking the 80s and 90s in England, where you would not be openly gay. It was not accepted at all. We were going through the very beginning of the AIDS epidemic at those times. And, you know, there's been some really good representation recently in the media of what that time was like. And so I think you very much assumed that you were heterosexual. This was something that was very different, was never have been talked about. So it wasn't, I suppose, you assume for yourself that that is who you are because that's what's expected of you. In hindsight, looking back, there were people when I was at school, when I was at university, who I was attracted to, who I just thought I was kind of looking up to. They were role models, or you know, I appreciated something about them. And probably looking back, I would say they were kind of more crushes or whatever.
It's hard because now, you know, I was at an event last week, and I think 90%, it was probably 95% of attendees were women, and 90% of the attendees talked about having girl crushes. So, but not in a sexual way, you know, it's just all more in a she's my hero kind of way. And it's like the language of it that we use, it just adds to that confusion, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that's been one of the biggest kind of points for me in my learning is, do I just really, really love this woman because she's incredible, or do I want to be with this woman? And it's, what are those boundaries? What's the difference between a friendship and a relationship? I have my best friend, where regularly when we're out places, people ask us how long we've been together. And it's we don't have that kind of a relationship, but because we know each other very well and we're very comfortable with each other, that seems to come up quite a lot. But yeah, I think that's very much a progress thing for me. Like, who am I attracted to? In what way am I attracted to them? What are these feelings?
So it's like going through teenagehood again.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, I didn't like it the first time.
But I think it just really kind of complicated the whole experience of trying to date again, because it was like I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to put myself into places where that could happen. And now I've changed the pool of people who I'm actually looking at, and I have no idea where to go and try and find that pool of people.
And that's, you know, I've sort of joked with my husband that we're just going to have to stay married, because honestly, I've no idea how people date these days. So it's just going to have to stay the way that it is. And he knows that I'm joking, I hope. Because I would learn internet dating if I needed to. But, you know, the idea of internet dating, it terrifies me. Like,
the whole process is just revolting. And I think some people can make it really work for them because the way that they approach it is very different. I'm not that kind of person. It really doesn't feel comfortable to me. I'm very much attracted to a vibe of a person. Yeah,
which you can't necessarily get from a screen.
No, and it's very much you flick over what the person looks like, you flick over this very basic information about who they are. And I think specifically because I don't know who I'm looking for, but if you look at male profiles on dating websites, they've all written exactly the same thing. This is a whole market of people helping men to write profiles, so you can actually learn something about them. But it just doesn't suit me. I need to have a conversation. I need to see the way that somebody communicates. I need to, I'm quite intuitive and empathetic, and I need to see how I feel with people. And often it's people who I would perhaps not have been immediately physically attracted to, but I'm incredibly attracted to their intellect and how they relate to other people. So that whole flicking over pictures thing just really doesn't suit me. So that was very, very tricky.
And I imagine sort of, you know, there's the extra layer of difficulty because if you've never dated girls before and I've never internet dated, never dated girl, now you're going to do that for the first time together. So how do you start dating? This is not where I was intending to go with the conversation, but, you know.
I knew it wouldn't go where you'd hope. Look, there are some really great community spaces online that you can join where you can have conversations with people where they are creating events that you can go along to. So you start to find out spaces, you start to find out what events there are, you can start to have conversations. People, you know, do message each other on those and hook up through that in whatever format they want to. Some of the dating websites are specifically for female-female relationships, so you can explore those. Some of the more broad dating websites have the option for you to select which gender or open to who can respond to you or who can communicate with you, and what you're looking for. So there's quite a lot of options. It's incredibly daunting. It doesn't feel... I don't find it a particularly safe kind of feeling to be meeting up with someone who you've never met before. I have to say that did feel different meeting up with a female rather than with a male. That certainly felt a lot safer to me. So I think a certain layer of the difficulty of meeting strangers was taken away.
Back in the olden days, when a bob was worth a bob many moons ago, when I was, dating, it was good manners for somebody to come and pick you up from home and, that type of thing. Whereas now I'm assuming that kind of thing doesn't happen. You would meet someone rather than, this is where I live, come and pick me up.
Yeah, for sure. But I think, my experience of dating prior to being married was at school and university. So it was people who I was around.
Who you knew,
so I had met them in person. We had a conversation, and then someone had asked the other person out and you would arrange to go on a date. So you've already done a lot of that scanning and, that unconscious kind of, this person's clean and tidy, they can speak well, they've,
I feel safe around them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they have a group of people here who they seem to be interacting with in a normal way, and they're not, blackout drunk or whatever.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of that scanning when you meet someone face to face, which you can't do in that online space. And even communicating by message or by phone or whatever, you can say anything.
Yeah.
And I kind of changed my profile a few times and highlighted different things, and you get a very different market of people responding to that. So you can pretty much say anything in that space. And I'm kind of honest to the point of naivety in a lot of these situations, and it never crossed my mind that people would be doing that. And then you meet them and you go, I'm exactly sure this matches up with what you told me beforehand.
So how was it going on that first date with a woman for the very first time?
Amazing, because it kind of validated that this wasn't just something that was going on in my brain. It was actually something that, yes, I was attracted to them. Yes, I did want to be involved with a female, and this wasn't just, like a phase I was going,
midlife
all
crisis.
of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was incredibly blessed that the person who I had that first date with was gentle and kind and thoughtful and very aware of what this experience was. And I told them, probably unfairly told them at the start of the date. Maybe I should have told them before that. I don't know how you navigate that, but they were absolutely beautiful and handled it in a way that made it such a positive experience. So yes, I feel incredibly blessed by that.
And at what point did you start to think, well, I need to start telling people this?
That's a really interesting question, because I think I have a very small group of very close friends, and they went through that whole process with me. So that was an exploration that I did kind of alongside them. So I've only really told two kind of sets of people who weren't part of that process. So my mum doesn't live in Australia, and we communicate by letter because she doesn't have technology. So I wrote her a letter.
How was that? How many times did you write that letter?
To be honest, only the once. It was just very, very straightforward of, I'm starting dating again, and I'm not limiting who I'm dating to just men. And my absolutely beautiful, old-fashioned, nearly 80-year-old mum at the time just responded with, well, that's a little bit of a surprise, but as long as you're happy, darling. Which was the most beautiful response that I could have got. And the only other people who I really had to tell were my children. Yeah. Which I was very nervous about, and which they laughed at me for when I had the conversation. And so we were driving in the car, and I just said I needed to tell them something. And it said exactly the same thing, really. I'm starting to date, and I'm not limiting who I'm looking at when in that kind of dating pool. And they both went, okay, can we have chips? Kind of, it was very much that kind of a reaction. And when I kind of turned to look at them, and my son just kind of looked at me and went, well, you raised us, Mum. What did you think we were going to say?
Yeah.
Which was a very affirming response to get from him, because, I very much have always tried to raise the kids in, you accept everybody for who they are. You don't use words like gay as an insult. We would have big conversations about that. Big conversations about being inclusive and with language and terminology that we were using. And lots of the areas that I've worked in, I've been an ally and done training and have always, it's always been, you treat everybody in the way that you would like to be treated. So he's had to read feminist books from being very young and, has been kind of gone through all of that with me. So they were just absolutely beautiful, and we just had, conversations about sexuality in general. And, they've hopefully have been raised in an environment where they would never feel like they had to come out to me, that whoever they brought home would have been welcome and there would have been no question about that. And we had conversations as they were becoming teenagers about, do you have to kind of keep your door open, or can you shut your door if you've got people over? And that was very much well, I'm not going to say you can leave it open if there's a, for my daughter, leave it open if there's a boy there, but not if there's girls there, because I don't know who you're attracted to. So let's just say that if you're comfortable with that person, you can close the door and I trust your judgment. And if you're not comfortable anymore, then you come out and you're in a space where I am. So I kind of had hopefully laid a really nice foundation to make that easier for myself with them. So.
And have they met any partners?
No, because I haven't gotten into any relationships where they've been to that level. And my kind of conversation with them about dating was, if this person is going to become a major part of my life, then you will know who they are and you will have that opportunity to meet them. But if I don't know where it's going and it's very new, then
we're not having a revolving door
to know about that. Because, I don't want you to get attached to people who are not going to be around.
Yeah.
If, and I won't know that straight away. So if you need to know, you'll know.
And your ex-husband, did you have to tell him?
I haven't explicitly told him. Not because I feel like he would have anything in particular to say about that. I suppose more just that the same kind of conversation was had, that if there's going to be someone around our children, that we would tell the other person who that was and what was going on. And that hasn't arisen yet. So at a point where there's someone who's going to be around, he'll know. Yeah.
Have you had any negative experiences from men? So I'll just put some context around that. So stories from, probably 20, 25 years ago of, from the court, places like that, of women's experiences, was hearing comments from men like, you just need a really good insert expletive here and that'll sort you. And have you had to experience or go through anything like that?
No, because probably haven't really had that conversation with any men about what my sexuality is. No, and I'd like to think that the people who I spend the majority of my time with would never have that reaction.
No, I was more thinking about strangers, to be honest, and I'm wondering how far we've progressed in the last 20 years, whether or not it is more accepting, or we are still getting those same kinds of negative responses from strangers who feel like they've got some sort of right to make comment.
I suppose I've never put myself in a position yet where that could come up.
Does it, have you been to places like gay clubs? I mean, you're not really a clubbing kind of person from what I know about you, so.
Exactly. I have been to events that are women-only events. I have been to the court before, but not as a person who was looking for a same-gender relationship at that time.
Yeah.
So one of those really annoying hetero people who's in the gay space.
It's fine if you're invited, so I've been told.
I don't know how to navigate a lot of that. yeah, I suppose Pride last year was my first Pride, and that was very different to how Pride normally is, because it was at the arena rather than in the streets and things. So I haven't really been in very many spaces or had many opportunities to kind of get to. It's more been an online thing.
Yeah.
But I know, like, I'm a book nerd, and there is a bookshop that is very much queer friendly, and there's a new bar opening in Frio, which is a gay queer friendly place, which there are a group of people who were all hoping to go and support that. And there's events and things that I've been to. But yeah, I'm kind of one of those people who wants to find someone to be in a relationship with, but doesn't venture very far from her book in the
Really
couch.
quite like it if somebody came and knocked on my bookshop door.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't know how the whole dating thing in general is going to work out for me.
You mentioned before that when you raising your kids, you told them not to use words like gay as an insult. When I was growing up, queer was very much an insult. And you come from a similar place in the world to where I come from. How do you go using language like queer now?
I suppose I don't know how to navigate a lot of this. I'm trying to work it out as I go along. And I think the kind of general rule that I follow is that I ask people what pronouns do they want to use, how do they want to be described, what terminology did they use, so that I can be on board with what their comfort zone is. I haven't put a label on myself, so I don't know how I'd like to be described. I don't really feel like I found a word that fits how I feel. Probably pansexual's the closest. I just want to find a person that I get on well with, and I think that that's, to me, what that means. I don't know how I feel about a lot of the words. Nothing seems to really kind of sit, and I know that there's a group of people who are unlabelled, but then that
in itself is a label though, isn't it?
Exactly. But I think it's also created a lot of response from other people about being labelled and not being labelled, and I don't really feel comfortable with boxes in general, and I don't really feel like they serve very many of us very well a lot of the time. I
agree 100%. And so I struggle with labels because I think, do we really need to label it? Does it really matter?
No.
And, sort of the alphabet, the LGBTQIA plus, is getting longer and longer with the different labels that we're adding to that. And I am reminded by the person who's going to be editing this that labels are important to other people, and I need to be respectful of that. Yeah. And so I try really hard. And I know that, if you go around a room and ask people to, 10 words to describe yourself, for heterosexual white people, generally you won't have heterosexual or white as part of their identifying. But people who come from different cultures or people who have different sexual labels that go with that's very much how they identify themselves. So sometimes those labels can be really important.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just, I don't know whether it's finding the right one or just going, you know what, I'm choosing not to fit in a box.
I am boxless.
And because I know who's editing the podcast, I'm not going to make a really inappropriate joke. But you find with using the term queer for things like queer friendly bookshop and things, it doesn't feel jarring or anything.
No, I don't think so. I think because that has really developed over time, I think there are specific words that if I heard people using them, that would make me feel very uncomfortable, just because they were only ever used as a negative thing. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of the TV show that I watched recently. It came out last year. There were 5 episodes, and it was based in London in the 80s, and it was about AIDS and the gay community. And it was absolutely incredible. I wish I could remember what it was called.
If you remember, message me and I'll put it in the show notes.
There was some really amazing representation, but the language and everything was so familiar to me from being younger. And I think it's difficult because I pass as heterosexual, because people talk to me. I have an ex-husband, I have children, which were things that in my 20s, if I had have been gay, I wouldn't have been able to be married. I wouldn't have been able to have children, because those things have become more accessible and more available very, very recently.
Yeah.
So I pass as heterosexual basically by saying that I have children, being the age that I am. So I've never really had to kind of label myself anywhere, because it's only very specific people that I ever have to have that conversation with.
And you don't seem to have gone through some sort of personality evolution and need to be, cover yourself in rainbows every day either.
I only own black clothing, so that's
got various shades of black.
Slightly out of the comfort zone.
And a purple jacket.
No, I do, yeah. No, I guess it has just been a tweak to who I'm
Openly,
that I'm attracted to, and I'm still exactly the same person. Yeah. I'm not going to wear rainbows. Actually, I am going to wear rainbows for Pride. I did buy glitter that's all different colours.
There was an eye roll there. So you are going to Pride this year?
I am, yes.
So what are you planning on doing for Pride this year?
I really have no idea.
Okay.
I'm going to land in the middle of Perth and hopefully find lots of things that are happening that are fun.
Awesome. And look, I should know this and I don't. What does Pride look like in WA this year compared to last year?
So there are a whole heap of events. There's been events going on for a really long time. So I like poetry readings, cookery stuff, presentations and talks. All sorts of different things have been going on for the last few weeks. And then for the Saturday parade, I believe that there's kind of a route that floats and things will take, who are either groups from the gay community or their businesses and people who are allies and are supporting. And that will travel around Perth, and I think the start and finish is Russell Square.
So out of the horse racing track this year?
Yes.
Did you have any personal feelings about it being at the horse racing track last year?
I had nothing to compare it to. Yeah. So to me, it felt absolutely lovely because there was lots of people wandering around dancing. There was music and everyone was very relaxed and being able to be themselves, which was my first real experience of being in a space where people were openly affectionate and you could tell that they were couples.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me, it was amazing, but I have heard a lot of feedback from people about the fact that it's not what it normally is.
I struggled with it, and obviously as an ally, because for me it felt like we'd gone back decades and we were hiding the gays behind the closed gate and having to walk around a horse racing track. Like that it just felt so wrong. And you can, all the excuses around COVID and all of that, it just felt like we were shutting LGBTQIA people away again.
A closet door.
That's it. So they can do their own thing in their own, so long as I don't have to see it, so long as it doesn't impact me. Whereas in the past, it's very much taken over Northbridge and, Perth, whatever that might be. And so it's been more of that public kind of celebration. And so what you experienced happened, but in public rather than behind the closed doors. But it's really lovely to hear that for you, it didn't feel like you were closed off. It was very much that positive experience and
And possibly for me that was a bit safer, given
that
I was only just experiencing a lot of that. Maybe for me that was actually what I needed at that point in time. I didn't have to proclaim myself to the whole universe.
Nice gentle transitioning point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and does it feel like you're proclaiming yourself to the universe by going to this year's Pride Parade or by doing this podcast, but
Doing this podcast, to be honest, I did go through a bit of a process of thinking about it and kind of this is probably my coming out in that kind of broad sense because I haven't really felt the need to proclaim anything before. And my coming out at work was very much, what are we doing for Pride? Oh, let's put lots of balloons up and make it look pretty. And that was kind of the extent of the conversation. It was just very, very accepted and there were no questions asked. It was just, all right, absolutely, let's get on board with that, which was beautiful. because in other jobs that I work in, it's not something that's recognised at all, and I can't imagine bringing it up in those spaces and asking to do something. So yeah, this is probably my coming out, to be honest. So hi.
Oh, that's really lovely. Well, thank you for feeling safe enough to, to be part of this and to use, to come out publicly on the podcast. So how do you think, if you were talking to somebody who, was possibly in a similar situation that you have been through, who was sort of going, but I've lived for, almost 50 years as a heterosexual woman, how do I navigate the next stages? What do you think a starting point would be that you would suggest?
Probably having some conversations with people who you really trust about how you're feeling. I mean, I did a lot of exploration with friends, but I also see a psychologist. So being able to kind of unravel where some of those thoughts and feelings were coming from and what they were related to was really useful for me. There's so much information available online. Yeah. I don't know if you've watched Heartstopper, but, the quizzes that Kit does online of, am I gay? Am I bisexual? That's a real thing. And a lot of people have commented on the fact that they actually did that as part of that process. It's not something that I did, but I think, there's so much information that you can look at, definitions, you can look at people's experiences, you can now see representation in the media starting to come through that you can perhaps identify with and start to figure out. But I think as well, just not feeling like you've got to find that box that you fit in, just saying to yourself, this is another aspect of who I am. This is just another aspect of who I am. It's just another group of people who I'm open to spending time with. And it doesn't have to be any kind of major change to your life. I mean, I'm incredibly fortunate that I've had such positive reactions from everyone who I've spoken to. And if you're surrounded by great people who you feel safe with, then hopefully other people are going to have that same experience. But yeah, I think just a lot of exploration, a lot of learning, open yourself up to different media.
And the thing is, if you don't have that supportive community around you, there are organisations where you can try and find additional support. So.
Yeah, for sure. There is always going to be a community that you can find where people will be supportive. And I think, so many people who are my age who have always known what their sexuality is and have lived their whole lives as gay, have been very adept at finding community and are very open and very giving and loving in terms of supporting other people through that process. So yeah, there are services, there are formal services, but there are also lots of very informal networks.
And I think now, because with the age of the internet, it makes it a lot easier to find those, whereas going back a couple of decades, and you said people who are your age who have known for their whole life that they're gay or whatever label they're choosing to use, back 20 or 30 years ago, it wasn't as easy to find those supportive communities. So it was very much kind of whispers and behind closed doors. So now it's so much easier to try and find supports. And I mean, just a quick Google search a quick search on Facebook and there's like 27 groups pop up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I mean, I think there's always been a language, hasn't there, within communities as well that allow you to know who is and isn't kind of coming from the same place as you. And I know I heard from my daughter's kind of group, there's a band, and if you say, do you listen to this band, that's kind of code for, are you in the queer community? So I mean, I guess that changes all the time with different groups.
Well, in the 70s it was family, wasn't it? That's where that song We Are Family came from.
Really? Yeah.
It was around, so people who identified as, well, then it was gay or lesbian, so it was family, and that was the code word of that time. Yeah. That's it. They'll always be. And it's sort of a bit sad, though, that in 2022, people are still using code words.
Yeah, it is.
Any thought? So one of the things that I remember you mentioning, actually probably around this time last year, was the difficulty with sort of navigating the dating scene, and women who were possibly in a similar situation to yourself but weren't ready to give up their husband. And so they were looking for dating, but I'm still married, but I'm just trying to explore things and see where they go. So has that been something that has been like an issue to navigate, and you just kind of swipe whichever way you swipe and just keep going? Or
yeah, I think you're okay with that if people are being honest about it. Again, it comes back to how much you actually want to give away when you create that profile. And some people are very open about that and do say, I am married and I'm exploring. And then you have a choice as to whether you want to get involved in that miry mess or not, or potentially.
I can see which side of the fence you sit on that one.
But obviously there's going to be people who are in those spaces who are not saying that.
Yeah.
Which I think can be quite difficult. But obviously the realizations come to people at different times, and a lot of the time for people, their circumstances are such that it's not easy for them to extricate themselves from a relationship. And they may be in a situation where that wouldn't be accepted. It might have a massive implication for them financially, with their families, all of those kinds of things. So I would never judge anybody for that, because we're all in very different circumstances. I just wouldn't necessarily want to navigate that with somebody.
Apart from anything else, it feels like you're just way too in the infancy of learning who you are yourself without trying to take that on.
I think that would be very complicated to take on. And obviously everyone's going to do this in different ways, aren't they? People, have open relationships and explore all sorts of different things, which is not something that feels comfortable to me. So it just isn't in my wheelhouse. But there'd be a lot of people who it was. I think that would be very difficult to navigate for anybody. Yeah.
So back to if you were supporting other people, if you were talking to somebody who's, perhaps talking to somebody's child and their parent was going through kind of coming out to their kids, what would your advice be to the kids on how to manage that and how to kind of navigate it?
Oh, look, I mean, I'm all about communication. Everything's always about communication. So it's talking about how you're feeling about it, and, giving children a safe space to be able to discuss that, giving them resources to look at, giving them other people outside of you who they can talk to. So, mentors and their kind of extended family and social network who they can discuss that with honestly. And I guess it's navigating what you do and don't want to involve your children in those relationships. Like whoever I was dating, I wouldn't be doing that kind of in front of my children unless it was developing into something that was going to be really long term. And everyone's very different with how they navigate that. But I think if children had any thoughts and feelings about it, absolutely they need to talk about those and any impact that it might have on them, because obviously, there is still bullying, and there, any point of difference can be a reason for bullying. So if they were concerned about how that was going to be perceived, to discuss that. I think schools are actually quite progressive now in lots of ways, and are very accepting of different family structures and different things. So that's probably not as difficult to navigate. But yeah, for children certainly not to keep that to themselves. If they've got some thoughts about it, they are absolutely entitled to say how they feel, and to ask for things to be done in particular ways if that's what feels most comfortable to them.
Yeah, and that's it. You can't feel like your feelings are never wrong.
Exactly. So. Yeah, and it's not a personal thing to the parent. Like if my children had concerns about it, I would have discussed that with them and said, okay, well, what do and don't you feel comfortable with? Yeah. And if you don't want me to bring a partner along when your friends are going to be there, then we can discuss that and talk about why that doesn't feel comfortable and what we can do so that we can all be authentic and navigate that for you. So, just I'm all about communication with everything. So,
and one of the things that I liked was, when you talk to your kids about it, you did it in the car, which we often say, when you with sort of parenting 101 type of thing, that if you going to have conversations with your kids, do it in the car because you're not having to make eye contact. And
For sure.
normally that's when you're trying to grill them about partners or something. I've got something I feel uncomfortable with, so I'm going to do it in the car so I don't have to look at you. It goes both ways, right?
Absolutely.
And I had a question. Oh, that's what I was going to ask. So are you inviting your kids to go to Pride with you? And I've got more to the question. I'll add more to the question. And then I guess what I'm wondering is this something that is potentially something that you can celebrate together? Or is this is not necessarily an or, it could be an and, but are you feeling like maybe at the moment it's your time to try and find out who you are, and so this is your space to try and navigate and enjoy and celebrate?
That's a great question, and I feel lots of different ways about it. So I think, so for this year, I haven't asked them to come with me. And I think it is very much of a, this is my thing that I want to do for me. If they wanted to go to Pride, absolutely go to Pride.
But can you take your friend and stand on the other side?
Kind of. It's something that I'm wanting to do with some friends. It's something that I'm wanting to do for me. And I think as a mum, that's quite hard to carve out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I am kind of keeping it for myself. I'm not gatekeeping Pride. They can absolutely go to Pride. But I'm kind of gatekeeping that.
Your celebrations of Pride.
Yeah, me going and doing it. But absolutely, if they wanted to be there, they could be there. That's, it's certainly something I would encourage them to do. To enjoy that space and to be a part of it. But yeah, though I'm gatekeeping this as an Emma thing.
Yeah. And because your kids are, heading towards adulthood now, it's a time when a lot of mums are trying to work out who am I and trying to find space for themselves anyway, and trying to carve out that space for yourself is difficult. So it must be really difficult of going, well, I want them to be part of who I am, but at the same time I also really would like some of my own independence again.
And I think as well, if they were going to Pride, it would depend on what reason they were going for, and I would like it for them to have that as their space as well, not have their mum there.
Yeah. Well, it depends, unless they were going to support mum.
Well, yeah. And I am going to be wearing a Free Mum Hug shirt for Pride. Because I'm aware that there's a lot of families where people are not accepted.
So even the idea of the free mum hugs, it just makes me want to cry. Oh, it's too much.
And I know that, there are a lot of grandparents, parents of both genders or any gender, who go along to be a support to other people as well as to enjoy that space for themselves. And I think it just felt quite important to me that I've been so accepted, but so many people aren't. And I'm a hugger, so it works for me in so many levels. But yeah, just to be able to, for people who might be there, who might be worried about being there, that they can have just that moment of acceptance and time with somebody felt important. Yeah. And also bought the T-shirt from a really great local group who make them. So trying to support that
win-win
as well.
Everywhere, yeah. Might go bankrupt supporting all of these good causes, but
absolutely.
Yeah. And did you wear the free mum hug last year?
No, I didn't have it last year. So this is my first free mum hug year.
I just think the idea of it in 2022 that we're still seeing parents who are not supportive of their kids.
I just do not understand that. Your children are given to you to take care of for such a short period of time, and you're there to nurture them and encourage them to be who they are. It just doesn't compute in my brain that there would be something that they were doing that I would go, oh no, actually that means I don't love you anymore.
Yeah.
It is unconditional. There might be things that they might do that I might not.
I don't like the things that they're doing, but I still love them. Yeah.
Exactly. But just, it just doesn't compute in my brain.
It doesn't compute in my brain either. And as you say, we get them for such a short amount of time, but I'm trying to make that as long as possible. Why would anybody want to shorten that? So, but sadly, 2022 it is still happening that people are being cut off from their families because of how because of their sexual identity or because of the pronouns that they're choosing or using. So yeah, free mum hugs are beautiful, although they still make me cry. So before we wrap up today, have you got any final thoughts that you'd like to share? Did we meander and miss anything?
I don't really know that I had an agenda. I was just following your flow, so I don't think so. I just hope things do change so that people feel more comfortable and safe to explore for themselves and be accepted.
Did it feel safe for you from when you first started to think, oh, perhaps it's not men that I'm going to be looking at? Did you feel safe that whole time? Was there any point where you thought, oh, how's this going to go?
No. I think I felt safe the whole time.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But I'm surrounded by amazing people, so I'm very lucky.
Yeah. Well, you could say lucky, but I think you design who you spend your time with, right?
True. I think I'm also in a safe space in that I don't have all of my family and all of my life history here. So if it did cause an issue...
Well, they're 12,500 miles away. It's all good.
I wouldn't actually be losing out on a lot.
Yeah.
It's not like we all live in the same village and any kind of disruption is going to have a huge impact on my life.
Yeah.
Which I suppose gives you a certain amount of freedom. But no, I haven't felt unsafe at any point.
How did it feel? Like, how does it feel
But I am
now?
only just coming
That's it.
out to everybody. Maybe it'll happen now.
But it's been quite a slow coming out though, right?
Yeah.
It's been a couple of years to sort of, as you've sort of slowly navigated your way privately before you've started to be a little bit more public with it.
I'm just going to meander through the rest of my life seeing what happens, I think.
Well, my days of a bull in a china shop, I think, are over. I'm a bit tired now, so meandering sounds quite appealing. Does it feel... okay, I don't know how to put this right, so I'm just going to put it. But does it feel like home? Like,
it feels very comfortable and very natural. And I suppose at every point, of kind of first talking to somebody, first meeting somebody, taking things any steps further, at all of those points it's felt very natural and very comfortable and very safe. So, yeah, I guess it probably just feels like that's another part of myself that has, like, the obsession with Harry Styles, which is also fairly recent. Like, it all kind of...
That's much more bull in the china shop type of thing though, right?
But again, the obsession with him started, and that was very much a part of my process, was watching a video of Harry wearing clothing which was very non-gender conforming. And it really made me stop and think, because my initial reaction to that was quite negative. And I've always been raised... That's
one heck of a backflip.
I've always been raised in that the first response that you have is the socialized response. And then you take a step back and go, what do I actually think about this? And so my first response was that socialized response of, what are they wearing? Like, what is that? What are they doing that for? And then my step back from that was to explore, who is this person? What do they stand for? And realizing that they were enjoying being themselves, that they weren't putting themselves into a box, that they were an incredibly kind person who was a safe place for a lot of people, I think. So that was part of my process, that whole...
I think it's really useful to be able to re-examine those thoughts and beliefs. So, and that's why I enjoy debating with people so much, because often it gives you that opportunity to go, well, yes, I believe this, but why do I believe this? How do these beliefs fit with what I think my values are? And do I still believe this, or is it just that I'm used to believing this for the last however many years? So, yeah. And
it was very much a case of, this person is just being authentically themselves, and it has no impact on me whatsoever and is really none of my business, which is kind of how I feel about most things.
Yeah. Although you didn't make it your business, but you've gone from that to... Now you probably know what he's wearing most days of the week type of thing.
It's interesting though. There's been a range of people throughout my life that have had these, we'll call them obsessions. But there is very much a similarity between all of the people who I feel like that about. I just feel they're very authentic people. They're very kind people. They do a lot of work for other people without ever saying anything about it. They communicate well. They're creative. And I think that's just my type of person. So to be able to see those kinds of people being very much in the spotlight, and, you know, as one of Harry's songs says, treat people with kindness is kind of his motto.
Yeah.
And that just feels like a really good motto to be having.
Yeah.
Because I think politically and worldwide politically, everything is very divisive. And I hate that.
Yeah.
So the more people with the more platforms who can be trying to promote kindness, the better, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think, what's the saying? Something like, in a world where you can be anything, choose to be kind.
Absolutely.
And I think that goes for, you know, if we can just show some kindness and compassion and empathy, the world would be a better place.
For sure.
So, yeah. Which seems like a really beautiful way to finish this. So have a wonderful Pride month and enjoy Pride Parade and the celebrations you've got in the lead up. Thank you very much for being here and for sharing all of these little meandering bits of your story and for being so open for that. I very much appreciate the fact that you let me pry into all of those little areas. If people listening, if you are celebrating Pride this month, have a wonderful Pride. If you identify as LGBTQIA+, then I hope Pride is amazing for you, regardless of where you are around the world. And if you are not, then I hope you enjoy Pride as well. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of A Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. For more information on the services we offer, head to whws.org.au or Women's Health and Wellbeing Services on YouTube and social media. Looking forward to the next episode where we uncover the hidden world of women.